to the next one. All right, so now we're going to the peak era, and this is for my personal peak era of gaming, where I probably spent the vast majority of time playing games. And this is between 2000 and 2009, so this would have put me between 10 and 19 at this time. And so many things of the 2000s in here. You've got Surge Soda, which was my favorite. It is no longer continued. The original 3D Doritos Zesty Ranch, which they no longer have either. I think they've come out with a 3D, but I don't believe it's Zesty Ranch. I think it's a different kind of ranch. And then there's also the Butterfinger BBs. We've got some D&D dice because I was introduced to Dungeons and Dragons during this time and fell in love with that. We've got a pack of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Original starter decks because I was obsessed with Yu-Gi-Oh! From probably about 2001 to 2003 or 4. So, and then we've got a WWE World Heavyweight Championship and a trampoline because everyone knows I fell in love with pro wrestling during this time, and I even did a lot of backyard wrestling during the latter half of this period. All right, well, let's go ahead and start. And so we started off, we got for Christmas in 99 the PlayStation 1 and Nintendo 64. Well, about 6 months later, it would be this day 25 years ago in 2000, I was gifted a Game Boy Color for my 10th birthday, and I got this exact one, neon green. So all the systems you see will be the exact ones that I got, because there are different editions of things, different colors. What you'll see here are the exact ones I had in addition. It's not the exact one. I didn't take a picture and put it up there. And the game I got was Pokemon Red. I remember, while I didn't know what the Nintendo 64 was, I knew what the Game Boy was. The Game Boy Color was the very first system that I ever wanted. Like, all my friends had it. I remember going to school. Pokemon was gigantic. It had just blown up, and everyone was doing the trading cards, and everyone was having their Game Boys, whether it was the original Game Boys, the Game Boy Colors, the Game Boy Pockets, and they were playing Pokemon. And so I think at the time I had the choice between Pokemon Red and Blue, and I chose Red. I can't say why. There's maybe just because I thought the red was cooler, the dragon. Charizard looked cooler than Blastoise on the front. Not 100% certain. But we picked Pokemon Red, and that became my go-to. There were so many nights as a kid, I'd be hiding under the covers. My mom would come in, be like, all right, it's time for bed. And then she'd come back, or she'd leave, she'd come back, and I'd be still playing it, and I'd have like the little worm light, because back then they didn't have a backlight on the system, and I'd like turn it off really quick, or I'd unplug it and I'd act like I was sleeping until she went back out of the room, and then I'd plug it back in and I'd play for like another 30 minutes, usually until the batteries died. And I used to go through batteries like crazy, but I loved it. It was a big system for me. I played a lot of games on it, from the Harry Potter games to Pokemon Red, Pokemon Yellow, Pokemon Blue. I think Gold and Silver. It really wasn't the Pokemon machine. I played other games, but that was really, I'd say after this, really the Pokemon series is what kept me connected to Nintendo for many years. So the Game Boy Color in 2000. Then in 2001, I started using the PC for the first time. This is what they looked like, and God, I feel like I'm like a teacher here. I'm like giving a history lesson to children. Yeah, this is what it looked like in my day. I had an older brother, which was very fortunate. Having an older brother allows for me to, yes, exactly, back in my day. I was able to have a lot more games, a lot more systems because I had an older brother. So whether he was getting them from my parents, or then when he was, he became an adult, he was 8 years older than me. So if I'm 10, he's 18 at this point. He's been 19. He can go out and he's, has probably a job, and he's getting some of this stuff. So he had computers. He was living with a friend at the time, and I would go over and spend the night sometimes at his house, and he would, he'd let me do all the fun little brother stuff. I get to stay up and drink Mountain Dew and eat pizza and play Dungeons and Dragons with his friends, and even though I'm the kid brother. And one of the things he introduced me to was that he had started playing on the computer, and he was playing games like StarCraft and Diablo, and just introducing me to a lot of the games that were available on a PC that I didn't know, because at that time you couldn't play those games anywhere else. They weren't available on a a lot of the consoles. So I fell in love with a lot of those games, and I never got to really have one of my own at that time, but I recall going over and every time looking forward to going over to his house to get to play on his computer. So, and then in 2002 would be probably my greatest love when it comes to gaming, which I think it is for many, which is the PlayStation 2. This is the console I asked for the most. I would say this is the thing that I wanted more than anything. During the time that I got my Nintendo 64, shortly after, it's probably about 2001, we moved to a small town in Nebraska, which is where we were living at the time. And there was a neighbor across the street who had a PlayStation 2. And it was not many people. We lived in a small little town of 500, 600 people. Almost no other kid had one. His dad just happened to I wouldn't say he was wealthy, but he made pretty good money, and he traveled around, and so he didn't get to spend as much time with his son. And so I think, he tried to, show his love through getting him things that he wanted. And one of the things that he wanted was a PlayStation 2. And I remember going across the street. We were good friends, and I was playing it. He would play it, and then we'd play like the SmackDown games. He had Grand Theft Auto. He had some other games. One game called Evergrace. We'll talk about in a bit. But I just remember being like, this. He put in Grand Theft Auto 3, and I was like, this is nothing like anything I've seen. I've never seen a game like this. This is open world. You can drive around. You can do anything. You can run people over. You can follow the laws and stop at the red lights, and you can drive a cop car, and there's so many things you could do. And I just thought, like, this, I have to have this. This has like everything I want in gaming. And I asked for it, for like a year and a half. And I think a birthday went by, and I just, it was too expensive, so I wasn't able to get it. And I remember being disappointed. But then in 2002 for Christmas, I got it, and I was very surprised. It came with Evergrace, which is the game that I asked for, and then also I was gifted that Christmas as well for my cousin a game called Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, and it became my favorite system. I think it probably, if I had to pick one, it still is my favorite system. I played it for years, and it was just so many of my favorite games. And you'll see this as we go along. Many of my favorite games come from this era and come from this system, because it's just a peak period. I was 12. I think for a lot of boys between the ages of 10 and 14, 10 and 15, that's a big impressionable period. And the things that you love, I think for boys and girls, just for boys, I think a lot of them have for video games. And it's this was a big one for me. So that was the PlayStation 2, or I should say the first PlayStation 2, because this is where the years of issues for consoles started. Then we had the original Xbox. As I had mentioned, I was very fortunate to have an older brother, and so while I would get one thing, he would often purchase the other thing. So I had a PlayStation 2, so he purchased an original Xbox. I remember him coming home one day with it, and I had no idea what it was. Poison Ivy made it in. Welcome back to the Darling Hideout, to our very special edition of my birthday bash. We are currently going down the timeline for all the consoles and gaming and a little bit of history, going into all the games that I've, not necessarily the games yet. We're saving the games, but we're talking about the consoles themselves and getting a little bit of nostalgia. Butterfinger BBs, Surge Soda, those Doritos 3Ds. We got some wrestling belts, Yu-Gi-Oh cards, and D&D dice. Because we are in the second period. We just covered the 1990 to 1999. Now we're covering 2000 to 2009. And we are full nostalgia today. We have our Mighty Ducks jersey on. We've got a good old Yoo-Hoo. 35 years of life. I feel very nostalgic this year. So we are... Oh, happy birthday. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Poison Ivy. It's been a very nice day so far. I'm really enjoying it. If anybody knows me, I don't like a lot of hoopla, a lot to do. I'm certainly a bit of a hermit, a bit of a sloth. So a perfect day to me is getting to relax, be around the people that I love, and just, take it in, man. Soak it in. So that's what we're doing. So yeah, in 2003, I got to play an Xbox. My older brother brought one home. I had no idea what it was because I hadn't heard of Xbox at this time. And I think he had Halo and maybe Fable. I remember playing Halo, and I remember not really caring for it. I didn't. I remember it becoming very popular. I just never took to it the way other people did. But I've never been a big first-person shooter fan, so it just didn't capture me. But Fable definitely did capture me. That was one of the first games he had. And then there was a game called Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, which I think just moved this particular system into high status for me. There's some really great games on this console, and I don't think it always gets the love it deserves comparatively to other consoles. I think trying to stand up to the PS2 era is very, very, very hard. But I think the original Xbox was really cool. So, and that will move us to 2004. Love Star Wars. Yes, I love me some Star Wars. And in 2004, I was gifted a Game Boy Advance SP. So the funny story in this, and this is I wouldn't say resentment, but I think probably a silly thing is that, oh, you had a blue one of those Game Boys. That's awesome. Yeah, I was gonna say that I actually didn't get this on my birthday. I believe I got this on my sister's. And I think I actually have to say I'm not actually sure why my sister was gifted one on her birthday, and I don't mean in why she shouldn't have got it. I don't recall her asking for one, and maybe she did, and I just don't remember it. I don't even remember knowing. A lot of times, I feel like I don't even recall like these things existing, and then just like being gifted one. There's only a few consoles like the PlayStation 2. The Game Boy Color, I knew of those and I wanted those. I didn't remember. I remember there being a Game Boy Advance. I remember some friends having one, but not an Advance SP. And my parents gifted us each one, and I don't remember if there were any games with them or if we were just supposed to play the games that we had for like my Game Boy Color. But it was a great console. It really cemented, I would say, the Game Boy Color and the Game Boy Advance SP. Cemented my love for handheld gaming. I played a lot of great games on this, from Pokemon Ruby to Final Fantasy Advance or Tactics Advance. There's just a lot of great titles on it, and it had a backlight built in, which was such a huge deal back then because, as I said, I had to use like a little worm attachment, light attachment for the Game Boy Color. So for it to have that backlight that you could turn on and off, that's what that little button in the center of it is on the top. That's you could turn the backlight on, and it was super cool. So I had that thing for years, and it was my handheld for probably the next 5 to 6 years. And then, as I said, every time I got something, my brother got the other thing. So while I had a Game Boy Advance SP, he got a PSP. She probably enjoyed playing with you, even if she didn't ask for one. Oh yeah, I mean that. Who knows? Maybe maybe she really liked playing. I mean, that's the thing is, as we go on, we haven't gotten into the games yet, but as we get into the games, there will be tell stories, and there certainly were games that my family enjoyed. There's games that remind me of my sister, and games remind me of my mom, or just my family in general. And I think that those play a part in making the list. Because as I said, the list that we're going to get to, 35 top games, it's not an exhaustive list of the greatest games of all time. The games I think are like narratively the very best, that you have the best art direction. These are just games that mean something to me. They either have something I really love about games, or there's something I have an emotional attachment to. But as I was saying, while I got something, my brother got the other thing. So while I got a PS2, he got an Xbox. When I got a Nintendo 64, he got a PS1. Well, when I got a Game Boy Advance, he bought himself a PSP. And I don't remember a great deal of playing on the PSP, but I do recall playing one game, and that was Grand Theft Auto Liberty City Stories. At the time, I believe that it was an exclusive, that it wasn't available on PlayStation 2, and I think that's why I played it on the PSP, because I was a big fan of Grand Theft Auto 3, Grand Theft Auto Vice City, San Andreas, and it was just, it wasn't available. The Liberty City Stories was sort of a prequel to Grand Theft Auto 3, and I remember playing it on the PSP, and I thought the PSP was very, very cool. Um, and I think that was the only game I played on it. But I did play it. I did get my hands on it, and it was a pretty cool console. So, and then in 2005, I got a PS2 Slim, and that's because this was the first time that one of my consoles crapped out on me. I had up to this point, I pretty much everything continued to last. Like I had my Nintendo 64 still at this time. I had my Game Boy Color at this time still. I had my Game Boy Advance SP still. All those things were still in working order, and I actually would have them for many years after that. But the PS2, my original PS2, the sliding tray, the laser in it went out, and that seemed to be an issue for some of the systems for both my PS2 and eventually a system here to come here in a second. But so I got a Slim, which had a pop-up top, and it was a little bit different. And I had that for a while, and then I eventually gifted that to my brother because of this next console, which is the PS3. I got the original the big honker PS3, which has the awesome. It's still my favorite writing on a console. It's the PlayStation 3 written across the front, but it is in the same font as the original Spider-Man movies, and I just thought it was so cool. And that thing was huge. It was gigantic. It was a boat. But when I got a PS3, I ended up giving my PS2 Slim to my brother, and I just love the PS3. I feel like I don't have quite the same nostalgia for the PS3 as I do for the PS2, just because not as many of my favorite titles come from PlayStation 3, but there are some really great ones. I did play so many of the WWE SmackDown vs. Raw games. I played, Oblivion. I played Skyrim. We still don't have Elder Scrolls 6. We still only have Skyrim. I played Skyrim. I played Grand Theft Auto 4. I think I played Assassin's Creed 2 on this. So I played a lot of games on the PlayStation 3. And it is a great, great console. This is the first console, I think, even now, if you go back and play, a lot of the games still look decent. You can still play through them, and they look pretty decent. So, and that would be the PS3. And so that is the peak era where I was gaming all the time.